Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. My name is Rob Skudovic. Thanks for joining me tonight. This is going to be the Week 14 waiver wire video, but before I get into that, I want to take a moment to say, just give a shout out to my Minnesota Vikings. Grew up, I'm a Vikings fan. Those of you who watch the videos probably know that. My Vikings won today. Philadelphia lost tonight, so we have the best record in football, tied with a couple other teams, but right now we're sitting at the top with Philadelphia for the best record. So love the way the year's going for my Vikings. I also love the way the year's going for my fantasy football team. I'm in 4 leagues. I made the playoffs in all 4, and it looks like, although it's not certain, but it looks like I'll have buys in 3 of the 4 leagues. Hope you had a good year too. I hope you made the playoffs. I'm excited for next weekend. Now, we're going to get just an early jump on the waiver wire video for Week 14. Some names that you want to begin to consider. Now, this week, we're not going to get real deep into a lot of names. I thought about it. I was starting to do some deeper research on wide receivers you could consider. But here's the deal. For a lot of you, Week 14 begins your playoffs, and you made the playoffs because you have a good roster. And so if you have a good roster, there's less of a need for you to go deep and to stretch yourself for sleepers. And here's another thing. This is not the time to start taking chances on a sleeper out there who's maybe available in 5 to 10% of leagues that you maybe had your eye on the preseason. You need to really roll out with players, names, and matchups that you can trust. This is not the time to take the chance and roll dice. So we're not going to get really deep necessarily. Now, what I would encourage you to do at this point, if you made the postseason, you probably have a good roster. Spend a lot of time studying the start-sit matchup video, some of those things. We put out later on the start-sit video. We give you a lot of information, trends, player news, what we're looking at, try to answer your questions. That's where I think you're going to find your value this time of year is at the start-sit, not so much the waiver wire, although some of you will need to work the waiver wire, especially like defensive matchups, things like that. That's what I play a lot come postseason. I will start-sit, especially like my defenses and even my kickers. Another mistake that people make, and I want to throw this out there real quickly, is a lot of people that do really well during the regular season and then come the postseason, they kind of get afraid and they tighten up. And so what they'll do is they might play matchups all year long, but come postseason, they'll tend to roll with names that they recognize. They get afraid. They're afraid to take that chance. So I need to tell you, just like you play in the regular season, you need to play in the postseason, play the matchups. Make sure you're making good, solid decisions. This is not the time to play scared. And if you play wise and you play the matchups, you can win your championship. Couple of early injury concerns. Trent Taylor left today. He was injured, although the way he's been playing, he was inconsistent, probably not a big deal. And then Matthew Stafford hurt his throwing hand, didn't come back today. That's going to have an effect on Matthew Stafford, but even the players on there, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, and others. So he left. We don't know what's going on. We don't know the extent of that injury. And one more quick point here before I get into any names for the waiver wire video. If you're not in the postseason, maybe you're not making it, but if you're in a dynasty league, the playoffs are still time. A lot of the leagues out there will allow you to make waiver wire moves even if you don't make the postseason. It's a great time for you to load your bench with a lot of sleepers that maybe in the offseason some moves will happen. Things will open up a spot for you or for that player that you picked up to be a starter. So just because you're out of the playoffs doesn't mean that you still can't work the waiver wire. I'd encourage you to do that. Here's the first running back that you may want to consider. Now, we talked about not going too deep and not stretching. This one is definitely a bit of a stretch, but Tion Green, the running back for Detroit, 6 foot, 220-pound rookie out of Cincinnati. He's available in 99% of leagues. Today he went out, he had 11 carries for 51 yards. And the reason why I did is Amir Abdullah sat out. He missed the game. Now, he went out, he was effective. I actually think that even though this is a little bit of a stretch, this is the first time he was active and played, I think he's a guy that you may be able to actually use in the postseason. Here's what I would encourage you to do this week. Watch the coach's comments regarding his starts, what they say. Is Amir Abdullah going to come back? So on and so forth. See how that shakes out. But the reason why I think he's a viable play moving forward is Amir Abdullah had really struggled all year long. 3.4 yards per carry. He's a smaller back, and so he doesn't run really well between the tackles, for example. Now, I think you need to consider with Tion Green in terms of is he a viable option for you. You need to watch Matthew Stafford's injury. Obviously, if he's hurt and he's out, that affects the whole offense, and it really devalues a lot of those players there. But went out today, had a good game. This is another one of those picks. If you are out of the playoffs, but you're in a dynasty league, he's a guy you could throw on your bench. Who knows what he'll do the last 3 to 4 weeks. Maybe he gets hot, and you have yourself a cheap or a wonderful running back for next year. Another guy that's going to be big on the waiver wire this week is Mike Davis, running back for Seattle. He's available in 93% of leagues. Now, he did really well tonight. He ran well. He got the ball in the backfield, and he looks like maybe he's going to be the running back going forward. But in terms of picking him up and starting him this week, I'd really caution against that. He's playing the Jaguars. The Jaguars' defense is very good. They're a great defense. And Seattle, besides a couple occasions here and there, have really struggled to run the ball. And so he's a guy that maybe you could pick up, but don't reach for him, and don't pick him up thinking that he's going to save you this week coming up in Week 14. Another guy out there is Alfred Morris. He's available in 31% of leagues. Now, he plays the New York Giants this week, coming up, will give the 15th most points to running backs. Now, all year long, when we started hearing talk about the Ezekiel Elliott suspension, we told you that Alfred Morris was going to be the guy. A lot of people at the beginning were all about Darren McFadden, and we said he's not going to be, it's going to be Alfred Morris, and he's been that guy. Since he's been out, he's ran very effectively, and on Thursday night, he had a great game. On Thursday night, he had 27 carries, 127 yards, and a TD. Since he's taken over for Ezekiel Elliott, since he's been suspended, his yards per carry have been a very healthy 4.8. Now, the one thing that I would say at this point that's hard for him, he's been good, he's been effective running the ball, but his overall numbers haven't been great, and here's why. If the Cowboys fall behind, he will tend to disappear from games, and the reason why they do that, if they fall behind, he's not great in the passing game, and Rod Smith is better in the passing game, and so that's what you're going to see. But in Thursday night's game, they didn't fall behind. They were able to run the ball, give him a lot of carries, and he had a great game. He's definitely somebody in the right matchup that you can start, depending upon the depth of your team and where your needs are. Alfred Morris. Payton Barber, the running back of the Buccaneers. Well, today with Doug Martin out, he went for 23 carries and 102 yards. He also added to that 4 catches for 41 yards. He's available in 96% of leagues. He's a big physical back out of Auburn, 5'11", 225 pounds. He's a second-year back. We really saw this coming in terms of, we predicted that there would be another running back on that roster that would become productive. We thought maybe it was going to be Marqise Rodgers. But ultimately, the reason why I thought, if you study Doug Martin, he's just been struggling. First game he came back, he looked good, but ever since then his yards per carry have been dropping. He's less and less effective. And so even when Doug Martin comes back, there's really honestly no need for the team to go back to Doug Martin. I think that they're better playing Payton Barber. So here's what I encourage you to do. I think he's a guy that could certainly be a play moving forward. I think he could be huge. You do have to wait and see what the coaches happen to say about the carries and the timeshare there. But don't be surprised if Payton Barber becomes their running back for the remainder of the season. Looked great today. Let's look at the Patriots running backs. Now, I was really skittish on Rex Burkhead. Now, it's funny because at the beginning of the year, if you look at our preseason videos and if you look at our preseason rankings, I was huge on Rex Burkhead. Loved him. I thought they brought him in for a reason. He's got a wonderful skill set. He can run the ball well. He's got great hands out of the backfield. Now, he is available in 33% of leagues, Rex is. And he's had double-digit carries 3 of the last 4 games. He's had 5 TDs in the last 4 weeks, and he had 2 more today. Here's why I've always found it to be a bit scary. It's hard to really trust in that offense because Bill Belichick is fickle. You never know from week to week what Bill's going to do. Just when you think you have it figured out, all of a sudden he'll bench a guy or just not give him any carries. So it's hard to trust that. The other reason why I have a hard time trusting in Rex moving forward is that there's so many mouths to feed there. They love to spread the ball around. And then the other thing is Dion Lewis, the starting running back at this point, is actually playing really well right now. And so I don't think Rex is suddenly going to become the starting back. But I will say this, we can't ignore him any longer. Rex clearly is the guy there. He's getting the goal line carries when they get in the 5-10 yard line. He's the one that's getting the carries. 5 touchdowns last 4 weeks. Rex Burkhead is a guy that you can look towards as a pickup. I will say this, I think that he's got now a pretty good floor, but he's got a lower ceiling because he's not going to see 20 carries a game. That's just not the way this offense operates. Another guy out there is Dion Lewis. Now, Dion Lewis is only available in about 12% of leagues, and he is going to split carries with Rex, although he's going to be the lead back at this point. But he's had 2 good weeks in a row where I think the week before he had 100 yards today, he had around 90 yards rushing. Been very effective out there. Drake. So here's a guy that I'm actually really excited about, and we've talked about him for a few weeks. Drake is available in 32% of leagues out there. He had a huge week today against a very solid Denver run defense. He had 23 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown. He also added 3 catches and 21 yards. Now, we've been talking about him for many weeks now, and what we have said repeatedly on the channel here is that he's just a better pure runner than Williams. And now today against Denver, who, by the way, Denver's got a lot of issues. They're struggling with a lot of things, but the one thing they do well is they usually stop the run. Today they got tore up by Drake in Miami. Today was the first week where I think he's really had an opportunity to showcase his talent. He didn't have to split carries. They had to go to him. And I strongly believe from going forward, now that he's had a chance to showcase his talent, that he's been effective. And he's actually had a number of weeks where his yards per carry have been very good. When Williams comes back, I think Williams will be relegated to the third down back, change of pace, coming off the bench. I think Drake's going to be the guy that's going to majority of your carries. Don't be surprised to see him consistently get 12, 16 carries in that range with 3 to 4 targets in the passing game. Had a big game against a tough run defense out there. He's available in 32% of leagues. Drake, go ahead and pick him up. Also, one more thing to consider for him is in the next 2 weeks, he's got some matchups that are favorable for running backs. He plays New England and Buffalo, and both of them, they're strong defenses, but they're not strong against the run, so he's a great pick for you out there. Another one out there, Isaiah Crowell, available in about 20% of leagues. He didn't have a big game today, per se. His numbers weren't huge. That was due mostly to the fact that they fell behind the Chargers and had to throw the ball. But in limited carries today, he looked good. He ran hard. In 3 of the last 4 games, he's looked explosive. He's running the ball really well. Now he plays Green Bay next week, and Green Bay gives up the 6th most points to running back, so this is a good matchup. And another thing that I think that should help him coming, unlike the game against San Diego, this shouldn't become a blowout. They should be able to continue to run the ball throughout at least 3 to 4 quarters of that game. Another thing that I think helps him moving forward is Josh Gordon came back today. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the video, but Josh Gordon, for a guy that hasn't played in 2 years, looked pretty good. In fact, I think that by next year, Josh Gordon is going to be a top 10 wide receiver. He looked great today. That's going to take a lot of pressure off the running game. So I would say Isaiah Crowell runs as a running back too, based on your league size. He is out there in 20% of leagues. If you're really desperate for a pick out there, another one is Frank Gore. Now, Frank Gore is available in 30% of leagues, and he plays Buffalo this week. So he's not a great back. He's 34 years old. He's not going to be huge. I don't see him getting over 100 yards a game. But he plays Buffalo, who gives up the 3rd most points to running backs, and he has had double-digit carries in 5 consecutive games. He's a guy that I would call a safe play with a low ceiling if you need somebody out there. Let's talk about the Packers running backs. Now, I know that one of you out there is going to give me a hard time because I've been kind of dogging Jamal Williams a little bit, and we'll get to him shortly. But let's talk about Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones came back today. He's available in 65% of leagues. Now, before he got hurt, before the MCL injury, he was a starting running back, and he had looked good there. He came back today. He only had 1 run, but it was one 20-yard run for a touchdown. Now he gets to play Cleveland. Now, the concern that I have is he plays Cleveland, who gives up the 8th fewest points to running backs. And then another thing that complicates the situation is Jamal Williams. Now, Jamal Williams is also out there in about 30% of leagues. Now, I have to admit, I have criticized Jamal Williams over and over. I said he wasn't very effective, and I think that's true going into this game. His yards per carry 3.3 in the last 3 games where he was a starting running back. But I have to admit, I'll humble myself enough to say this. Today, he goes off for 21 carries, 113 yards, and a 5.4 yards per carry. So here's my concerns that I have for those 2 backs. I think they're viable backs. I do think, my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think long-term, even going into next year, I think Aaron Jones stays the starting running back. But Jamal Williams had a great game today. He certainly earned himself some carries, and that is going to probably shake out into what I see maybe as a running back by committee. Now you add on top of that, they're playing Cleveland, who is very good against the run this week. So watch the waiver wire, see where your needs are, listen to what the coach says, and kind of see where that shakes out. Another one out there is Semaj Perrine, available in 17% of leagues. He's playing a lot better lately. Early in the year, he's another one where his yards per carry are very low, just like Jamal Williams. So when Kelly went down and Chris Thompson went out, it didn't look really good. He seemed like a guy that maybe people need to play but don't expect a whole lot from him. He's actually looked effective the last 3 weeks. The thing that's helped is in the last 2 weeks, he's had 6 catches. So now they're actually mixing him into the pass game, which is good because that adds another dimension to him. It gives him some value in PPR leagues. And this week he plays the Chargers, who gives up the 5th most points to running backs. So Perrine should be a great play this week. Or Perrine, whatever. So here's another guy that we have talked about for a long time, and I'm surprised how available he is out there, and that's Alec Collins. He's available in 24% of leagues. He's had 4 TDs in the last 3 weeks. Today he had 15 carries, 75 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's starting to get the goal line carries. He is their go-to back. I know there's been a lot of talk about Danny Woodhead, and we said, you know what, we're not that excited. Danny maybe has some value in PPR leagues. He's an older back. He's smaller. He's not great running between the tackles. He's just not physical enough to do that. This guy can do it, and he has done it all year. In fact, all year long, he's been effective. His yards per carry are at 5.0. So he's been very effective, and I think the Ravens may have found their future running back, not only for the rest of this year, but going into next season. Alec Collins is a great play out there, and so a lot of you guys need to pick this guy up, if no other reason. Play them or keep them off your opponent's bench or keep them for next year for your dynasty leagues. Alec Collins is looking better and better. You got to get this guy and pick him up. Theo Riddick is a guy that some of you may need to look at possibly. He's available in 60% of leagues. Now, we talked earlier how Amir Abdullah was hurt. Today he had 5 catches for 41 yards. He also added a rushing touchdown. I would say he has some value in PPR leagues only. I wouldn't even consider him a standard league. Some other things you need to consider. He's playing Tampa Bay this week, who's a kind of a nice matchup. They give the 10th most points to running backs. His value, Theo's value, will fluctuate based on a few things. Amir's status, obviously. the coach's evaluation of Tion Green's performance, and Stafford's injury. Those are all three things you need to look at if you think he's a guy that you may want to pick up, and I would only consider him if you're in a PPR league. Look at the New York Jets running back situation. Matt Forte has been dealing with a swollen knee. Talked about he's missed some time this year, but he did play today. He had a touchdown and 3 catches. Added to that, he also had 15 carries. Now, this week coming up, the Jets running backs play Denver, goes up to 7th fewest points to running back. So what you're looking at right now between Forte and Powell is really running back by committee. That's scary from week to week, especially playing Denver, who is pretty good against the run. I'd really have a hard time putting my trust in either running back. Like we said last week, if you're going to do it, the back to put your trust in would be Matt Forte as long as he's playing. And this week he did get that touchdown. So if you're really desperate, Matt Forte is probably the guy to go with there. Now we'll talk about CJ Anderson. He's available in 19% of leagues. I wouldn't pick him up if I was you personally. He had a good day today, but I just don't think he's worth risking it. There's so many things that are working against him. From week to week, we have seen that where all of a sudden CJ will begin to look good. All of a sudden next week, Charles will get the carries, or Booker will get the carries, or many weeks they split them 3 ways perfectly even, the carries. Another thing I think that makes him not an attractive play this week is Trevor Siemian just not playing very well. He's in true running back by committee. There's a lot of reasons to avoid him unless you're very, very desperate. Don't get caught up in the fact that he had a good day today. I would shy away from CJ Anderson. Let's look at some quarterbacks that you may need. Some of you out there that you're struggling with some quarterback play, or maybe you're somebody who had Aaron Rodgers early in the year, or you were rolling with Watson until they went down, and you've been playing week to week the matchup. So who do you look at? Well, a guy that's readily available out there right now is Andy Dalton. He's available in 46% of leagues. Now, we don't know how he's going to do this week because it's Sunday night. He plays Monday night, so watch that game, see how he does against Pittsburgh. But I would say this, Andy Dalton's played a lot better lately. Since week 2, he's had 18 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions. So he's playing pretty well now. This week, he has a fair play, not a great matchup, but a fair play against the Chicago defense that gives up the 9th fewest points to quarterback. So Chicago's not a great team, but they're pretty good against the pass. Andy Dalton's playing a lot better. He's not a great matchup, but for some of you out there, he might be the guy that you want to roll with this week. So here's a great pickup for a lot of you out there. In fact, that's what I did. I made a trade this week. I traded away Carson Wentz in a keeper league and some other things. I got AJ Green. I won't get into all the details, but what I did is I kind of grabbed from this guy. I want to trade away Wentz. I got a good wide receiver, but I need to get value at quarterback and saw that he had Jameis Winston on his bench. I took a look at his lineup. I took a look at the games he has to play in weeks 14, 15, and 16, and I felt good, and I got him. And sure enough, Jameis came back today, and he looked pretty good. He's available in 51% of leagues. After being shut down for 3 weeks with shoulder injuries, he threw for 270 yards and 2 touchdown passes. Take a look at the 7 games where he's played full games this year because he's missed a lot of time for injuries. 7 games where he's completed the entire games. 4 of those games at over 300 yards passing. The reason why I think he's a great pick down the stretch is Tampa Bay's defense is brutal, which means they have to throw the ball a lot to stay in games. They're often playing from behind, so you get a lot of garbage time stats. I don't really care if he's a great quarterback. All I care is he puts up good fantasy numbers. Now they play Detroit this week. It gives about 13th fewest points to quarterbacks. But Detroit is vulnerable. If you take a look at it, some of the quarterbacks lately have actually moved the ball pretty effectively against them. In fact, today, Joe Flacco looked decent. And if you know anything about Joe Flacco's year, he's really struggled. So Jameis Winston has got some matchups come up that are really great. He's available in about 50% of leagues. He's a wonderful plug and play for a lot of you out there. He is getting healthy at the right time. Jimmy Garoppolo got his first start today. He's available in 84% of leagues. He had what I would call a fine start today. Now, maybe it wasn't great, but all things considered, first time around the offense, in fact, they don't have a lot of great weapons around him. I thought he did just fine. He had 293 yards passing against a Chicago defense, as we previously stated, that's good against the pass. Now he plays Houston this week, and Houston gives up the most points to quarterbacks, so I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have a good day. Don't be surprised if he doesn't throw for over 300 yards and 2 TDs in this one. He's a cheap, and for those out there that do daily fantasy, he's going to be a cheap stream for you this week. Another guy out there worth looking at is Josh McCown. Available in 59% of leagues. He plays he plays Denver, who gives up the 17th most points to quarterbacks. The last 2 weeks have thrown over 300 yards. He's looking really good. The emergence of Anderson, who Anderson has merged to become a legitimate wide receiver 1. Robbie Anderson looks really good. Josh McCown is having a very good year. Love this guy's 38 years old. What a great way to end his career. We don't know how many years he has left in the league, but right now he's putting together a very nice season. For a lot of you, he's going to be a great plug and play in the playoffs. And a guy that I've stayed away from a long time, hopefully it's not my Vikings bias, because I don't want my biases to get in the way. So sometimes what I do is I stay away from Vikings players, just being afraid that maybe the reason why I might be inclined to want to start them or advise people to start them is because I'm a Vikings fan. So I stayed away from Case Keenum in terms of wanting to start him. Felt like going into this year, he hadn't proven a lot. He was a journeyman in a lot of senses. He's available in 35% of leagues, and now he plays Carolina, who gives up the 12th fewest points to quarterbacks. But if you take a look at Carolina, they've actually been exposed by some quarterbacks lately, and they've given up some big games. So Carolina looks like they rate pretty well, but I think they definitely can be exposed. Case Keenum has been good the last 5 weeks, and it's time for me to start to realize this guy is a very good fantasy option at this point. He's playing at a very high level. So Case Keenum is a guy that you could probably roll with. In the last 5 weeks, his touchdown interception ratio has been really good. He's had 11 touchdown passes to only 3 interceptions. He's got very good weapons around him: Adam Thielen, Diggs, Rudolph, McKinnon. So he's a guy that if you need to roll with, you can feel pretty confident rolling with him right now. He's playing good football. Another one out there that is kind of a sneaky pick, I actually picked him up on a couple of my leagues, is Aaron Rodgers. He's available in 26% of leagues out there. He began to practice this week, and there's reports that he could return week 15. And so for those maybe that are doing a matchup weekly play, if you've been rolling week to week from different quarterbacks, he might be the guy that you can pick up. Now, the thing that concerns me a little bit, he can't play until week 15, and you don't know exactly how rusty he's going to be. But for some of you that are rolling week to week, he's a great option for you. So pick him up, put him on your bench. Let's see if he comes back. Let's see how it does. Week 15, 16 could be just the bump to push you into the championship and cause you to win. Once again, he's available in 26% of leagues. The reports are that he's going to start week 15 for them. Wait and see. Alex Smith is out there in a number of leagues. He was dropped by many. He had a hot beginning, then he went through a stretch of 3 or 4 games where he kind of fell back to just some very average or below average quarterback play. Well, today he blows up, has a huge game, throws for over 300 yards, 4 TDs, and he's got a great matchup coming up this week against Oakland. Now, last time he played Oakland, he went for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns, so he had a great week this week. They're going to Oakland. That's a great play, and they're still vying for the division. As much as they've played terrible lately, there's still an outside shot that they could win this division. So if he is available in your league, Alex Smith has a great play this weekend. Go ahead and play him and feel good about that. No doubt there's Marcus Mariota. He's available in 14% of leagues. He plays Arizona, gives up the 5th most points to quarterbacks. He hasn't played great this year, but the one thing that's kind of kept him relevant in terms of fantasy is his legs. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the year, so he's not a great quarterback, but he's an average quarterback who runs the ball well. He does just enough to be relevant and have a great matchup against Arizona. Here's some quarterbacks to avoid. Jacoby Brissett plays Buffalo, gives up the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks. He had a 3-game stretch where Jacoby played really well, but beyond that, he's really struggled all year. I would sit Brett Hundley, Trevor Siemian, don't even consider it. Joe Flacco plays Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, sit him. Jay Cutler. Now, Jay Cutler on paper could look good playing against New England because New England right now, according to some of the statistics, gives up a lot of points and yardage to quarterbacks. But a lot of those stats were really built up the first 4 to 5 games of the year. In fact, if you look at since week 4, the New England defense has only given up 11.88 points per game. So right now that New England defense is playing great. Sit Jay Cutler, sit Trubinsky, Kaiser, Geno Smith. None of those guys you want to trust in week 14 in the playoffs. Go ahead and sit those guys. Some wide receivers to pick up out there if you're desperate. Nelson Agholor is available in 23% of leagues. Now, early this year, he had 6 touchdowns in 8 games. He looked pretty good, but then he went through a stretch there where he kind of swooned. Week 7 through 11, his numbers really dropped. And because he wasn't getting a lot of yardage and his targets were low, he became what we call touchdown dependent. If he wasn't getting a touchdown, he didn't have a lot of value. Well, now the last 2 weeks, he's gotten touchdowns again. And then tonight, he has a huge game. He goes off for 7 catches, I believe, was somewhere around like 140-some yards. I don't know the final total on that, but he had a huge game tonight. So he's looking like he's heating up again. It's an offense that moves the ball pretty well. Carson Wentz is a great quarterback. So a guy that you may want to look at is Nelson Agholor as a wide receiver 3 to 4 based on your league depth, size, scoring, etc. Another guy out there is Josh Dotson. He's available in 53% of leagues. He plays the Chargers right now. Now, he's got 5 touchdown passes on the year, and he's been getting better and better each week. This is a guy that missed some time his first year because of injuries, but he is a first-round pick. He's got a lot of talent. He's getting better and better, but I would probably say, here's my take on him right now. He runs as a wide receiver 4 for the most part. He looks good, but I think his value probably isn't necessarily, unless you're really desperate, I probably wouldn't start him in the next couple games, but he's somebody that you could look at for next year. I think going to next year, he's going to have a lot of value. But if you're very desperate this year or for the next couple weeks, you could take a look at him. Another guy out there is a little bit of a stretch is Trent Taylor, available in 99% of leagues. Today he had 6 catches for 92 yards. Now they're playing Houston, who gives up the 6th most points to wide receivers. He's a smaller slot receiver who's had limited play this year, but in limited play, he's actually looked pretty good. And I think you're going to see a bump in his stats and usage now that Jimmy Garoppolo is at quarterback. So he's a guy that in deeper leagues, if you're really desperate for somebody, you could roll with Trent Taylor. I think he's got more value probably in PPR leagues, more of a possession receiver. Kenny Stills, available in 45% of leagues. He's become the number 2 guy there in Miami. Devontae Parker, a lot of people are big on him. I actually thought he was going to have a breakout year. He has, and he's pretty much disappeared from that offense. He's seen a decrease in targets and production. In fact, his last 2 weeks, he had 1 catch for 5 yards in both games. That's what Parker had. So right now, Stills has become the number 2 guy there. He's putting up pretty good numbers. He's been pretty consistent. He does play New England, according to paper, gives up a lot of points to wide receivers. But like I said earlier, be a little bit careful there because New England defense is playing a lot better than what you would think. So there's some caution that. But Kenny Stills is moving to that number 2 guy role there. He's putting up decent numbers. So for some of you that are desperate, he's a decent play. So here's another guy that's really come on lately, Dede Westbrook. Available in 72% of leagues. Today he had 6 catches for 78 yards. He's had 25 targets in 3 games, so that's a pretty good target. He's getting targeted quite a bit in that offense. If you look at the beginning of the year, if you studied, if you watched the Jaguars at all, there's a lot of conversation come out of the camp and from the coaches that they really love this guy. They love the way he performed in preseason and camps. Then he got injured, but now he's back. He's played 3 weeks in a row, and he's become the number 2 guy there between Marqise Lee. This week he plays Seattle. Now normally that would scare you a little bit, but without Cam Chancellor there, without Richard Sherman there, I think that he's a guy that is a pretty safe pick. Marquise Goodwin, available in 68% of leagues. Today he had 8 catches, 99 yards. If you look at the last 4 weeks yardage totals, here's the last 4 weeks of yardage totals. 1 week he had 68 yards, he had 83 yards, he had 78 yards, and then this week he had 99 yards. So we're seeing some consistency in terms of the yardage he's putting up. I think he's going to definitely benefit from Jimmy Garoppolo throwing the ball. Now he plays Houston, who gives up the most points to quarterbacks, and Houston's very weak against the pass, so Marquise Goodwin is something that you can roll with. What I would say with him, though, he's the type of wide receiver who likes to stretch the field. He's a former track star, so don't depend on him if you're in your PPR leagues, but in standard leagues, he could definitely fall into that wide receiver 3-4 category. Josh Gordon. So I was excited to see how this guy did. He's available in 28% of leagues. He had 1 beautiful catch today, and he really had another good catch later on. He had a pretty good line today. He finished with, I believe it was 4 catches for like 84 yards. When you consider he hasn't played football in 2 years and he's not in football shape and he's only been with the team for a couple weeks, I think he had a great game. Now, he looked a little fatigued at times, and I think that's expected for a guy that hasn't been on the field, hasn't been playing, but he looked really good out there. Now, this week coming up, he plays the Green Bay Packers, who got up the 5th most points to wide receivers. Josh Gordon looked good today. He's got a lot of talent. He immediately becomes a wide receiver 2 or 3. If he's in your league, you need to pick this guy up. Even if you don't think that you can start him, don't let your opponent pick him up because Josh Gordon could go out next week, break 100 yards, have a TD. That wouldn't surprise anybody. He looked very good today. Jermaine Kearse out there. He's available in 55% of leagues. Now, 2 weeks in a row, he's been huge. He had 7 catches, 105 yards, and then 9 catches for 157. So he blew up huge. Now, I will say be careful, kind of temper your expectations. He plays Denver, gives up the 4th fewest points to wide receivers, so I expect him to cool down a bit for a couple reasons. One, Denver's defense is better, but the other reason why I expect him not to be huge, his numbers were really blown up by the fact that they were playing from behind. They had to throw a ball a lot, and they're playing Denver, and let's just be honest, Trevor Siemian, that Denver offense scares nobody. They're not going to put a lot of points on the board. Therefore, the Jets shouldn't need to throw as much as they had the last 2 weeks. Also, Anderson in that offense is a clear number 1 guy. Kearse is the number 2 guy in terms of targets and volume there, but he has had 2 good weeks, so for some of you, may need to consider him out there. Let's look at the Rams wide receivers. We'll take a look at Cooper Kupp. Kupp is available in 23% of leagues. Now, last 4 games, he's averaged 6.25 catches per game. He had 116 yards against the Saints 1 game. So since Robert Woods has been out, Cooper Kupp has really been the guy that's got a lot of those targets. He's been very productive. I continue to like him going forward until Robert Woods comes back. I think he'll be his go-to guy. And this week, they play Philadelphia. I think that could be a higher scoring game. The other guy out there is Sammy Watkins. Now, Sammy Watkins had 4 touchdowns the last 5 games. He's another one who has had a huge bump in his value with Robert Woods being out. Now, he's only available in about 14% of leagues, but you can see if he's available in your league. Has value while Robert Woods is out. Marqise Lee is available in 30% of leagues. He's Blake Bortles' favorite target at this point today. He had 7 catches, 86 yards, and a TD. If you look at his overall stats for the year, they don't look great, but part of the reason why he's missed games because of injuries, or he's missed portions of games because of injuries, but when he's been in there, he's been pretty consistent, and he's Blake Bortles' go-to guy. Now this week they play Seattle, but like I said previously, that's minus Cam and Sherman, so you don't have to be afraid of that defense per se. He can go out there and have a pretty productive day for you as a wide receiver 3. Another out there is Sterling Shepard. He's available in 21% of leagues. Now, he's been good this year at times. He's another guy who missed games because of injuries, but he had a couple games where he had 5 catches, 70. He had one game where he had 11 catches, 142 yards, and earlier the year, he had 7 catches, 133 yards, and TD. So this guy potentially can be a big guy out there. He's the #1 wideout for the Giants. He's really the only true wideout that they have. He has a great matchup this week against Dallas because with the 4th most points to wide receivers. Now, the one concern I have is Geno Smith at quarterback. That hurt him a little bit today. I think if Eli was there, he probably would have had a bigger game. So Geno Smith, he started slow. But the one thing, if you watch the game, you followed the progression of it. As the game went on, Geno Smith got a little bit more effective. They started moving the ball a little bit better. Sterling got a few targets. He got some numbers there. I think that he's going to do a lot better next week. Don't be surprised to see Sterling with 5 or 6 catches, 80 to 90 yards in this game. He's a very talented wide receiver, and he's the only real wideout they have in that offense at this point. He's available in 21% of leagues. Another guy out there, if you're looking for a tight end at this point, if you're desperate, is Ricky Seals-Jones. Looked pretty good. This guy's had decent 3 weeks in a row. He's clearly become their go-to guy in terms of their tight end there, and his availability is very high out there, so you can go ahead and pick him up. Another out there is Hunter Henry. Now, I want to caution you there today. He left at one point. He looked injured. We don't know the extent of that injury. We don't know if he's going to be back, but he's had a couple good weeks in a row. He's got a lot of talent, so he's a guy that is available in about, I would say, 33% of leagues. There's some defenses for you to consider. Now, I'm not going to talk about the top defenses. So what I'm going to talk about is defense that are available at least in 50% of leagues or higher. I'm not going to talk about the top defenses, obviously. I'm not talking about Jacksonville. Obviously, we know that if you have Jacksonville, that's a great start. But these are defenses that are readily available in most leagues, 50% available or better. And they have great matchups this week. And one is Green Bay versus Cleveland. Great matchup there in terms of if you look at that breakdown. Another was Cincinnati versus Chicago and Tennessee at Arizona. So those are games, those are some defenses out there you may want to consider. They are highly available out there for you. So hope your season's going well. Hope you made the postseason. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave it at the bottom of the video. God bless and take care.